Welcome back to another episode of the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Dave Pulcini. Dave is the host of the Dear Roch to Retire Well podcast and a member of our firm. Dave, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Alex. Hey, when did you change the name to Roadmap to Retirement? I liked Alex Does Financial Planning.
Alex Does Financial Planning would have been a better name, but it was shot down by a few important people. So,
okay, all right, I got you.
We got a new name. What I thought we would do today is do a client mailbag. We got some frequently asked questions. It was pretty cool after we released a few episodes. I heard from a few people that had questions of their own or ideas for podcasts that we could do different episodes. I think a few of these maybe could be standalone episodes at a later date, but for now, we're just going to do a couple quick Q&As. So If you're ready, I'm going to fire away and we'll go from there.
You want me to answer the questions? Can I ask you some back?
You can.
I'll ask you some questions. My questions. Okay, go ahead.
You're the guest, so we're here to learn from you.
I'm ready.
All right. So the first one, we spend a lot of time talking about financial planning for people that are approaching retirement. Maybe they're in retirement, but we got the question of what should somebody in their 20s or 30s, much younger, be doing to start to plan for retirement?
Wow. Okay. So planning for their retirement is start saving early. The cliche advice of let's start saving early, but can I bring it into like the full financial plan for someone in their 20s and 30s?
Yeah, I think we can open it up to general financial planning for young people.
All right. And I've been asked this question before, and it's like, what would the 25-year-old Dave have done? And it's tough, guys. If you're a 25, 30-year-old listening to this and you're just finally starting to make some money, you're thinking, I finally have some extra money to spend on something or get a nicer car or a nicer apartment or potentially house. It's hard to save that for retirement. And when you guys see, I'm speaking to the younger folks now, when you see the 60, 70, 80-year-olds with 10, 20, 30 million, it is because when they were in your shoes, they did the thing that they needed to do, which is start a savings plan early. And I'll get into some quick details on that. And then they just stuck to it. Okay. So number one, if I were 25-year-old Dave, what I would have told myself, and I did not do this, by the way, Alex, and this is why it's easy for me to give the advice, is I would have an emergency fund. And again, cliche advice, but get the emergency fund, probably 6 to 12 times your monthly expenses. So if your bills are $3,000 a month, we need like 18,000 to 25-ish thousand, we'll call it, in a side account. How do you get that? Because it's really hard. You set something up where it's $200, $300, $100 per month, automatic savings going into a separate account that we can't touch. Okay. I know it's annoying. I know it's hard, but like you start it with something and then you slowly increase that. So if you went next month and you said, I'm doing $200 a month into this side fund, and 6 months from now, you said, I want to add $25 more per month. Now it's $225. A year later, you said, I can do $50 more per month. Now it's $275. Guys, that adds up really quickly and it will help you a lot along the way when an emergency pops up. Second thing, 401k. If you have a 401k or the availability to get a match, minimally do the match. If you get a 4% match, do at least 4%. We should be doing more than that, but that's based on your own financial situation. That depends. But emergency fund, 401k, third piece, I'd get some very inexpensive term life insurance, which sounds scary. Stay away from the permanent policy stuff at this point in your life, unless you have a circumstance where you're inheriting $1 million next year and you need to tax shelter some money. Stick to the basics. Emergency fund, pre-tax matching or pre-tax account setup, contributing, term life insurance. And then the biggest piece of this whole thing, Alex, is increase a little bit every single year. If you increase 1% per year when you're 25 years old, by the time you're 40, which trust me, gets here before you know it, you'll be doing 15, 20, 25% of your pay without even knowing it into investment accounts. And Alex can back me up on this. If you're doing 25% of your pay from 40 years old on, your financial plan is going to look really good when you get to retirement. Yep. So 30s, real quick, 30s, different, right? Most folks in their 30s, kids, married, buying a house, potentially, obviously for all of those things. You need some extra financial planning. You need to have a will in place. You need to have a healthcare proxy, potential power of attorney, get your documents in order, be responsible. We have too many folks that don't have these things in order and they don't know. I'm going to add an extra one in here, Alex. Right. If I'm 30 and I could do this again, get your parents organized. Because here's the thing. What if something happened to your parents right now? If you're listening to this right now, what if something happens to your parents today? Who are you calling? What are you going to find? I actually say that a lot. Like if something happened to you today, what would they find? What would you find if something happened to your parents right now? Do you know? Maybe that's a conversation you should have with your parents, because I'm telling you guys, it will save you hours and hours, potentially weeks or months of really in-depth work with an estate planning attorney. It's going to cost you a ton of money to find their stuff. So get your parents organized too.
That's a great segue into another question we had, which is
Yeah.
what can you do to either help your parents if they're in a later stage? We got a question about the 5-year look back rule.
Yep.
So what do you think that if I'm 35 years old, my parents are in their 60s or 70s, what's a good starting point? Where do I go for that?
Yeah, I honestly, okay, real action items, because this is the Roadmap to Retirement podcast, right? We want to give the folks something to do. So if you're motivated by that and you really want that sound and it resonates, I would honestly, it's my parents. I'd text my parents and I'd say, hey, who's your financial advisor? If you don't know that person, you probably should. Then I'd probably get into the conversation like, hey, mom, dad, if something happens to you right now, like, do you have a will? Do you have stuff on one page? Because here's the deal. I don't want to deal with this if something happens to you guys today. So action item is find out who their advisor is. Second thing is see where their documents are, if they have any. The latest stat, Alex, is 50% of business owners don't have a will or succession plan. 80% of Americans do not have an updated will. So like, get your parents organized. I won't get into the 5-year look back. That's like a gifting rule and going into a nursing home so they can't take your money type of thing. That might be a different podcast all in itself. But action item, ask your parents who their advisor is and their estate planning attorney, and who would I call if something happens to you today? I have no idea where to begin. Who do I call? And that should open the conversation. Yep.
Okay, great. I think that's a good answer. We had a lot of questions around that. Back to the younger investor part of it, I think the one thing that you left off that I would make a point of adding is to look into a Roth IRA if it makes sense based on your tax situation.
Yes.
You covered the emergency fund, the 401k, those things are definitely important. I think a lot of times the Roth piece gets left behind because it's oftentimes not, it's hard. You have to set it up somewhere. It's not just part of you start a new job, there's your 401k, you're automatically enrolled. And then a lot of 401k plans have a Roth option now, which I think is a great thing to take advantage of. There are some small differences between that and a Roth IRA, but all in all, I think that's a pretty good spot to be.
Totally. When we work with folks that are in retirement, and you can help avoid this in your 20s and 30s, most of the assets that we find that we work with are pre-tax assets. So what that means is if someone has $1 million in a 401k and they have a pension, everything they get, they have to pay taxes on. And let's say someone's in a 24% tax bracket right now. What if by no fault of their own, the tax bracket goes from 20, I don't think this will happen. That's my disclaimer, Alex. This is probably not going to happen. But what if it goes from 24 to 44? You have no control because you still need the same amount of money. Now you're just paying 20% more in taxes. How do we avoid that? After tax accounts and Roth IRAs. So it's a great point.
Sure. And I think that's the biggest conversation we have with people that are retired or they are in that stage. They've got maybe a couple $1 million in pre-tax accounts, and their biggest concern is how do I get this from a pre-tax account to something I don't have to pay tax on? So I think most of those people, if they had a time machine, they would go back and save a lot more into a Roth versus the pre-tax account that we talked about.
Yeah. And if you're 25, 30 years old listening to this, like, do you think you're going to be making more money when you're 50 or 25? Like, probably when you're 50. Everyone says next year, right? I'll make more next year. I'll do that next year. Or 10 years from now, I'll be making a lot more money. That means you're in a lower tax bracket right now. So paying your taxes now is probably better if nothing changes than paying your taxes later when you're making more money.
Sure.
So pay the taxes now, get it in a Roth. All right. Sorry, Alex, I rambled a little bit. Can I ask you a question?
You definitely can.
I have one. Like I have a list of client questions that I have in here because I make stuff out of it. But mine's more, I don't want to say philosophical, but there's not a direct answer to this. And I get this a lot. And I think a lot of people are asking this. Folks that are headed into retirement, I get this a lot. This is what they're thinking. They're not actually asking this, but this is in a roundabout way. They don't know they're asking this question. And it's a simple one, but it's very important. Do I have enough? That's the question. So how would you answer that for my clients? Okay. I'll send it.
You're going to hate this answer. Do I have enough? The right answer is always what? It depends. So to give some context on that, and I've heard a lot of people, they usually pluck some kind of arbitrary number. It might be $1 million. So now they have this goal of, I need to save $1 million to retire. So I guess I'd like to put that in context of what $1 million means for your retirement. So there's something called the 4% rule, which I know we've talked about a lot in the past, but without going into a lot of detail, basically we can spend 4% of our portfolio each year. And if we do that, it should last for roughly a 30-year retirement, again, in theory. So your $1 million portfolio should spit off $40,000 per year. So the question is now, can you live on $40,000 per year? And for some people it might be, for others it might not be. But you want to add to that number, you have your $40,000 a year from your portfolio. You also have however much you're getting from Social Security, maybe another 30 or so. And then you have a pension on top of that. So the point of the example I'm giving is it really does depend on what else you have out there. If you have a large pension and you're fortunate to be in that position, you don't need as much of a nest egg. If you're taking Social Security, again, that's money that adds back into it. I think locally in the kind of Rochester area, we have a lot of retirees that comfortably live on less than $100,000 a year. So for them, maybe $1 million is a good number. Again, not a perfect answer, but that's
Great
the
answer.
way that we would approach it.
So I was recently at an estate planning attorney's office last week, and I was meeting with a client and the adult children. The father had passed away, and one of the adult, he's 52 years old. He looks at me and he says, "Hey, I heard you need $1.45 million to retire on. Is that true?" And I love that, guys. It's a goal, right? Whatever. And the answer is, his name's Dave. Dave, how much do you need every month? Then we need to back into where it's going to come from. So if you need $5,000 a month after tax and you have a pension or Social Security and then this going on, then I can give you your number. But that goes to my other point. We've talked about this before. Like, a friend told him that. And I said this before, stop listening to your friends. Don't listen to your friends. They have a completely different situation. They don't know what's going on with you. They don't know why we were at that estate planning attorney's office. They don't know what Dave is getting from his parents or what's going on. But like, to just pick 1.45 million, I'm trying to save the listeners some stress here. Like, don't listen to anyone else. Wouldn't it be nice to find out the actual number that you need? Like, I need to save X. Here's how much I need to save every month to get to that goal based on what we're invested in. Then once I get there, then I know the answer to, do I have enough? But short of doing that, it's impossible. So for the folks listening, if you find a great financial planner like Alex Neary or others in wherever you're finding them, virtually or locally, a good advisor can help you back into that number rather than guessing. We have way too many people retiring and guessing on how much they need rather than trying to actually figure out what they need. And I'm telling you guys, if that's a question that you have, it feels really good to know the number and get to that number. It's like having financial freedom. I know that I'm all set basically no matter what. It's awesome.
Sure. I think the other thing that we see a lot, you're talking about a needs-based approach where we're saying, I need $5,000 a month. How can I get it?
Yep.
The other approach is a lot of people have done a really good job of saving, and they're in a fortunate position where you can reverse that and say, rather than what I need, I have X amount of dollars. How much can I spend every year and still be okay and not run out? So if you take somebody that was making whatever, $70,000 per year, and you say, hey, just so you know, you could actually spend $100,000 a year and you're not going to run out of money. Can you find something else to spend $30,000 on? Sometimes it's a fun conversation. Some people are so conservative in nature, and that's how they got to that spot. But if your goal isn't to leave a ton of money behind, let's make sure that we spend as much as we can without being irresponsible, I guess.
It's so hard. I have so many clients that they're all set. A lot of the people we meet with, they're all set. They're just trying to avoid the big mistake. The two things, they're trying to avoid the big mistake, and they're like worried about it's FOMO, the fear of missing out on, like, hey, I know that I'm good, but like, am I missing out on any tax breaks? Am I paying the least possible? How can I get this to my kids in the most efficient way without them having to pay tons of taxes? But yeah, I like the needs-based approach, and the approach that you're mentioning is,
yeah, we'll find a name for it later.
What can we spend?
That.
What can we spend? The wants-based, it can't be the wants-based approach. Anyway. All right, give me the next question, Alex. Give me the next question.
Another question. So actually, off the topic of what you're talking about, I've gotten this question from a few different people. And it's, again, the psychological part of their entire working professional life. They were taught to save money and not spend it. And then one day they're retired and you have to flip this mental switch of, now I'm taking money out of my accounts. And a lot of people really struggle with that. So open-ended question, but what would you say to someone that is struggling to accept that it's time to start to spend their money?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of folks, they watch their balance go up and then maybe down if the markets are bad over their 30, 40-year career, and they're tracking their numbers, or maybe they don't even look at it. But even when you open a statement, there's still that feeling of, they all know it. For the listeners, when you open a statement and you see the balance is $200,000 less, I don't care who you are, that's annoying, but you're still working. So you usually have time to ride it out and invest it properly, whatever. but you're building, you're contributing, you're working, you have your employment, which is extremely valuable, and you're adding every single month. To switch to taking it out, when you see that balance go down because you're now taking withdrawals, it's the same feeling you have when you see that account lose $200,000, whatever the number is. And it is really hard. What I would say is if you have a detailed plan, and when I say detailed plan, this does not mean meet with a financial advisor for 6 hours a week and we need to look at this is like you meet with an advisor, they go through a detailed plan, meaning like a couple hours of your time. And then you review and you have strategy meetings and review meetings and you make sure we're doing the right things. But what makes people feel better is when you say, and for the folks that have a plan, this is just part of the plan. We projected that your 1 million was going to turn into 960,000 this year. And then maybe it'll grow a little bit. And then next year it's going to go down to 920. And it does get scary because you retire with $1 million, 20 years later, maybe it's 300,000 if you're using that asset. What I do find a lot though, Alex, is the folks with pensions and Social Security is they're not even using their money anymore. Like you get to retirement, you don't even need it because a lot of people are continuing to work, which this is for a different episode, but like a lot of people that we work with don't even use their money. And we're running more into like, oh, now I have to take it rather than spending it down, which same thing though. I'm telling you guys, when you have to do the RMD, which again, for a different day, when you're 73 years old as of this podcast and it's going up, but when you have to take it out and you see your statement go down, even though you still have the money, just seeing your statement go down is stressful, even though you have it in a different account, because that's something you've been watching for so long. What I would say to those folks, Alex, if it was an open-ended question in there was, or what I would say is, if you have a plan for it and you're mentally prepared for that thing to go down and it's working for you, it feels a lot better than just taking money out and guessing. So get a detailed plan.
Great answer, David. Do you have any questions left over there?
Sure. I have unlimited questions, Alex.
All right.
The listeners are going to laugh. When I meet with clients and I leave, I document like any questions that they ask. So I have a ridiculous number of questions in my iPhone notes that I keep. But let me ask you this. I could go, here's a good one, Alex. How am I doing? This is a client asking this. How am I doing versus other people my age? What do you say to that person?
It's a tough question to answer, and it becomes another dependent thing. So one, everybody has a very different situation. If you are, you said your own age. Okay, if I have two 30-year-olds and one is a surgeon making $400,000 a year, the other person has a more typical job making $50,000 a year, they have a very different situation. And your expenses are different, and it turns into this whole unhealthy thing about comparing yourself to other people, which I think I would say the same thing in other areas of life outside of finance. So what I would encourage my clients to do is not worry so much about that and compare themselves to where they were 6 months ago or a year ago. And if we can continue to make progress and get themselves into a better financial position, that's better. I think about this a lot when people say, what should I be saving in my 401k or what should I be saving in my Roth IRA? And sometimes people have this New Year's resolution where they're really excited to save money. So they say, I'm going to max out my Roth IRA and I'm going to do the max into my 401k. I'm going to save all this money. And that's January 1st. And by the time we get to February 1st, they are stressed because they have no money in the bank. They can't pay their bills. And they're like, why can't I pay my bills? And it's obvious, of course. But what we'd rather see people do is what you mentioned earlier. Pick a number that is a little bit more conservative, that's really comfortable. And if it's $100 a month, that's fine. A year from now, let's make it $150 a month. A year after that, it'll be $200 a month. And work your way up incrementally so that it doesn't add that financial stress to your life. A lot of times that person that's really excited in January, by the time they get it all sorted out, they're doing much less than they could have been saving anyway, because now they're a little bit trigger shy that they had a bad experience.
Yeah. I'll add one thing and we'll move on to your other question. If you have any more, the thing that I would say when you're comparing yourself to other people your age, what does their number have to do with your number? Like their number, I'm telling you guys, your number is different than everyone else's number, besides maybe your spouse. But like your neighbor's number, they might need 3 million, where you might need 2.2 million, or maybe you need 4, or maybe you need 10. We have folks all over the place that some people save $40,000 a month. They're not going to have enough. We have people to save $200 a month, and they're going to be more than all set. It really does depend. But when folks ask how am I doing versus other people my age, you can do the old Google search and just say, what is the average savings for a 25-year-old or 45 or 65? From anyone that's listening to this, if you're listening to this podcast this far in for these answers, you probably are doing better than what it says on Google. So if you just want to feel good about yourself, really comparing, just Google it. What I would really say is find out what your number is and work toward it. So next question, Alex. Keep
Next
this thing
question.
rolling, man. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question that you're going to hate?
No.
All
No,
right.
you can't.
So
No, go ahead.
Are you ready?
You're gonna ask anyway. Go ahead.
It's April. We are in an election year. If you haven't gotten this question from clients already, you're going to get a million times. But what are your thoughts on investing in an election year, and who do I want to win for my stock portfolio?
Wow. I am definitely going to give an answer on who we want to win as president at the end of this 45-second answer. So stay tuned. Okay. These are such boring answers. Stick to your plan. Find your number, stick to your plan, keep saving the way that you were. Election years, if you're looking for an actual market answer, are typically more volatile than other years. There's stuff going on. There's a debate, if we have debates this time, and one president says one thing and the market goes down because of it, and another one says another thing about interest rates, and then it goes back up the next day. If you're investing during that time, that is actually good for your portfolio. You're putting money in at different points of the markets. But the bottom line is just stick to the plan. It doesn't matter. Who do we want to win as president? If I'm being selfish about my own portfolio, you ready, Alex? It doesn't matter. I don't know if I was going to say that. There are different reasons for different candidates to win for sure that may or may not improve certain parts of a portfolio. But if you are in a diversified account, I just talked to one of our fund folks yesterday. We had lunch and he walked me through the history of the elections, Democrat, Republican, what the markets did during those terms after elections. There's no difference, guys. Like that there are facts that show it doesn't matter who wins. The economy could almost be completely separate. The research shows that a president does not affect the markets the way that we might think. Although you might personally be annoyed with one candidate over another, I would really try hard not to allow that to affect how I'm investing my money according to my plan. Is that a good answer?
I think so. And it goes back to some general advice to everybody out there. Just stop watching the news. There's nothing on there that you need to know about. If there's actual news, it'll find its way to you, but stop getting worked up about this stuff and enjoy some time with your friends and family. Go for a walk.
Only if they support the same political candidate as you, because otherwise
then we can't be friends.
I'll ask you one more.
Yeah.
I know your time is valuable and we are wrapping up, but this is a selfish question that I had from it's a friend, and this is a real question. And it was, I'm changing a couple facts here, but my father recently passed away and I inherited $500,000. What should I do with that?
Okay. So it's another it depends answer. So I would say commonly we run into this. The majority of the assets that are being inherited are in some kind of IRA, 401k retirement plan. Is that what we're talking about?
I can give you real numbers here, Alex. So
okay,
there's no way you can do a full financial plan for these folks right now, but around 300,000 of it is coming from the sale of a home.
Oh, okay.
After tax dollars, 200,000 ish was in an IRA. Yep.
Okay. So we'll start with the IRA. So $200,000 in an IRA. That very simply, with the current IRS rules, you have 10 years to take distributions out of that account without paying an additional penalty. So if they passed away in 2024, you've got until 2034 to take distributions. Generally speaking, it makes sense to take even distributions for 10 years, although you don't have to do it that way. Taking distributions does not mean you need to spend the money. It just means you need to pay tax on the money. So it is possible to turn around and reinvest that money depending on their specific needs and circumstances. Mm-hmm. The other $300,000, is that right?
Yep.
Is from the sale of a home. So they would actually get that tax free, which is great. Mm-hmm. And then from there, to go any more into detail, I really want to understand what they've got going on. We have younger clients or people that are middle aged still working that inherit money, and they a lot of times use it to supplement their own retirement because maybe they aren't as far along in savings as they'd like to be. So if you get an extra $300,000 and you're committed to using that for your own retirement, there are certain ways to invest it. If you have other short-term needs, that might come into play also.
Yep.
And I think that's as much of an answer as I can get without knowing
Yeah.
more specifics. Is
I
there
know it
anything
is. It is.
anything you want to add to that?
I want to add one thing because I want to give some action items here for the folks. Like I want to give some ideas that financial advisors can help with when this is happening, because this is like the largest wealth transfer in the history of the world is coming as the baby boomers get older and we are inheriting money, especially on the pre-tax side. So two planning ideas here. These folks are, the gentleman's 50. If he inherited a large pre-tax account, two things. He has to take it over 10 years. So how do we offset that? Because the government just wants him to take it, so he has to pay taxes, right?
That's easy, Dave.
So yeah, exactly. So we're going to offset that. And we're going to say, hey, take out, I'm making this up, Alex, $30,000 a year for now, but we're going to redirect. If you don't need it, we're going to make your 401k $30,000 contribution this year. This is an exact, but like we can offset the gains that you have to take from that IRA by contributing more to a pre-tax retirement account. There's other things you can do, start a business, other ways to reduce taxes. Another thing is, what if this gentleman was retiring at 58 years old, Alex, and he plans on making $0 8 years from now? Maybe it makes sense to take it all 9 years from now and then 10 years from now when he's in a lower tax bracket because he's making $0. So for the folks that are getting an inheritance on a pre-tax basis from a parent's retirement account or a pension, remember this. And just remember, the biggest thing is talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. I work with Alex, but like go see Alex. He knows what he's talking about. There are simple planning strategies to use that can offset huge taxable gains. And one last thing I'll say on this, I did work with somebody recently where it made sense to actually take it all up front this year, pay taxes on it. It was over $1 million. There were reasons for it. Take it all. And then we did projections on, hey, in 10, 15, 20 years, this is why we're doing this. So there are different ways to take that inheritance money and use it to your advantage. So,
yeah, and I think it goes back to having a plan. I can't tell you how many times I've run into somebody that inherited money 3 or 4 years ago, and they're just meeting with myself or another advisor. And you look at what they did, and there's just like one little tweak they could have made that would have saved a lot of tax money or something else. And you can't go back in time. And I think that's one of the, not to give us a shameless plug here, but one of the values of working with the right advisor is they will see something coming before you do and be able to adjust things. We really can't go back and fix a mistake that was made a month ago or 5 years ago.
No. Can we close on one thing, Alex? One thing that I've heard, and we used to say this to folks, is especially when they were working with a younger advisor, I'm going to say it was me. I'm not saying I did this, but I'll pick on myself. I don't want to pick on other firms. I saw somebody was working with a 24-year-old advisor and they inherited $1 million. You folks might hear this. Oh, don't you think you've outgrown your advisor when that happens? That was just the worst. And it's like, let me tell you that. And it works because it's like, if you're working with a younger advisor and they don't have experience on that kind of thing, which luckily I've made it to 20 years in the business. And now I would never say that, but I could if I wanted to. Folks, you don't outgrow your financial advisor. If you have a good advisor, you grow into the process with them. Alex said it. A good advisor, because of their process, will see these things coming before you could even possibly think it's a need that you have. And when that need pops up and that happens, and you give your good advisor a call or you let them know that thing happened, they're already planning for this. And I will tell you, if you go to consistent review meetings or you're meeting once a year or twice a year with your advisor, we don't have time to possibly tell you all of the things that are going to pop up. You'd be bored to death. There's too many action items, but like, we are thinking of this. Good advisors are already thinking, hey, if you inherit this money, or if this happens, or if you bought a house out of state, or if you're trying to put your kids through college, we're already thinking that. But again, we might not say it every single time unless you want to sit in our office for 4 hours at every single meeting, which I don't think people do. You grow into the process. You do not outgrow a financial advisor. Okay. The one thing I heard, Alex, was no one ever left a financial planning meeting and said, I wish my advisor talked more. So I think we should end it right there. Look at
None of your clients.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for
Yeah,
everyone
man.
listening. This has been the Roadmap to Retirement podcast, and we'll do this again sometime.
Thanks, Alex. What an outro. I love it.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.